Hey everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast, where you get to learn everything you want to know about addiction and recovery. I'm your host, Angela Pugh, co-founder of Kansas City Recovery, life coach, and recovering alcoholic. To learn more about me, you can listen to episode 0 on your podcast app or find us on the web at addictionunlimited.com. Hey everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Angela Pugh. Thank you for spending some time with us today and listening to the show. We've got a great guest today, as usual. We're going to talk about some pretty hardcore opiate addiction, and this is a story that offers a lot of hope to people, certainly people that have been struggling with this. I know the opioid epidemic is huge around the country for sure. We're hearing about it in the headlines every day, and this is a story that took place over the course of a decade, maybe a little more than a decade, and a lot of trials and tribulations. But to come out the other side and have a victory is so important to spread that story and that message so people know, don't give up, don't stop trying. You know, there's always hope. As long as we're breathing, there's still hope. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear this story. Let's welcome David to the show. Hi, David.
Hello, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So tell the listeners a little bit about your story and where it all began for you.
Well, it began basically when I was in middle school was the first time that I ever took a drink. And I drank, I believe it was one drink. It was a Zima, and I got really drunk. I probably only weighed like 80 or 90 pounds, and I vomited the very first time that I ever had a drink.
Wow, Zima's really taking it back.
Really taking it back.
So, like, you remember the first time you drank?
I loved the way it made me feel.
From the very first time?
Yes.
I did not have that experience.
I didn't like the way that it tasted.
No, it tastes terrible.
But I loved the way that it made me feel.
Wait, even Zima tasted bad?
It was just so sweet, and I think it just made my stomach hurt, but it still had that effect that I liked.
Yeah, of course. So where did you go from there? I mean, did you keep drinking? You liked it so much. Did you continue to do it?
No, I didn't. I was really young, and that was just kind of the first time that I drank, and there was some stuff going on in my house that was crazy when I was a little kid, a lot of fighting between the parents and my older sister, and I was really anxious. I was really afraid, and I decided, I remembered that first time that I took that drink and what it did to me and the effects that it had on me. So I decided to drink again, and I went down to the basement and grabbed a Bud Light, and I think I drank like 5 of them. And
Wait, how old were you?
I was probably 15.
Oh, okay.
14, 15.
Yeah.
Probably like a 8th grade or a freshman in high school. So, and I kept going back upstairs. I would just grab one, and I would go upstairs and I'd drink the whole thing. And I'd go back downstairs and be like, I'm just going to grab one more. And I did that like 5 times until I passed out. And that's basically how this all started. From the very beginning, I think I was kind of fucked. I was fucked.
Me too. That is my story.
Yeah.
Where were your parents? Like, was anybody home like when you were doing this? Did anybody know you were doing it?
Nobody knew I was doing it. My mom was probably in her room. I had the house to myself. My little sister is 6 years younger than me, so she was little. So it was just me and her and my mom. My dad was already gone at the time, so that's what I did. And that's what I did to cope. And that was right around the time that he moved out and stuff. So
I know for you, opiates ended up being your primary. So when did you get introduced to opiates?
I was about 17, and it happened, like I said, my mom was going through a lot of things. She had, I think, what it's called fibromyalgia. She has a lot of pain in her joints and stuff. And back then, she was prescribed 10 milligram Oxycontin, Xanax, hydrocodone, all that stuff. And she is not a drug addict, and she probably only took one of them ever and probably didn't like the way that they made her feel. And I went into her closet one night and I found a buffet of pain pills, and I was interested in them, and I began taking them. The first night I took one, then I started mixing them, and before you knew it, I was taking 5, 6 a night, and I was 17 years old at the time. I wasn't even, graduated high school yet.
And were you like sharing them with friends, or was this really kind of a solitary event?
It was by myself at first, and then I remember one time I had a friend come over and was like, you have to try one of these. Like, this is what it's about. Like, this is really fucking good, you know. I love it. Give me more. Where is it? So that's what I did. I gave him one. And of course, like, he's normal. Like, he likes to drink and like he probably enjoyed it, but he definitely didn't have that reaction that I had. Like, I was just like amazed. Like, whoa.
Well, yeah, because it probably relieved so much stress and pressure for you. It was a whole different reaction.
It was.
So where did you go from there? So you're messing around with pills in the closet. How do you end up addicted?
Well, because at that time, I wasn't, like, I went through all of those pills. And at the time, like, I was surprised that she never found out, like, that the pills were gone. But what happened was we moved from that house into another house. And during that time, I just took all of those and kept them for myself and just, like, blamed it on the mover or, like, blamed it on, like, someone else or... I don't know what happened. I don't even think she asked me like where they went because she probably would never have thought that I would do that at that time. Like, this is before anything really went wrong, so she didn't know. So I kept those, and I don't think I really was physically hooked, but the feeling in my mind was already hooked. Like, that mental piece was for sure there. The very first time that I took a hydrocodone, that mental piece was there. I just didn't have access at the time to be physically addicted or dependent on them.
Right. Does it take a lot to be physically dependent or to become physically dependent?
No, it just takes a certain amount of time using them every day.
Regularity,
and
maybe.
And the amount also plays a factor into it. And I don't think I didn't get physically addicted until I got my own prescription. And I didn't know any side effects, any dangers, anything like that were associated with these pills. I knew absolutely nothing about them.
That's one of the things that makes me so angry about pills in general, because I feel like even as adults, right, I feel like there is this sort of misconception about how dangerous these pills are because people get them so easily from the doctor and they're prescribed for legitimate purposes. Like, I get that. But to have them kind of hanging around the house or in the medicine cabinet or whatever is just, it's so freaking dangerous. And then young people too feel like they're just experimenting. They're just messing around, not realizing again how dangerous they really are. And I know one of the things with opiates for sure is it does kind of fast track you through the addiction process, like in your brain, right? So me as a drunk, like it took me years to get to the point of really being addicted, physically addicted for sure. And it took, a few years for that mental obsession to really take over, to the point that I was thinking about it all the time. I was either drunk, hungover, or planning my next drunk. That was pretty much the stages of my life. And I know opiates will kind of rush you through that process. It's a faster process.
It's a really fast process.
Yeah. What happened when you got your own prescription? What was that about? How did you get your own prescription?
Well, it just turned out that, I stayed back in Kansas City when all my friends went off to KU. And it was because I just never gave a shit about anything or gave a shit about school. And I wanted to do whatever I wanted to do. And at that time, it was get high. That's what I wanted to do, full time. So I stayed back.
That was your job.
That was my job. I did get a job, however, doing some construction job. And it just turned out that the person that was running that company he was a drug dealer. So he was selling cocaine, and he also had a hookup with a doctor, a dirty doctor, where I could just go into the physician and pay him a couple $1,000 and he would write me a script of whatever I wanted. And this wasn't just a monthly prescription, this was weekly. And when I say that, I mean, I would go through my prescription in a week, sell the rest, and I'd go back to this doctor and have him write a prescription in one of my friends' names. And I'd go with my friend to the pharmacy and do the same thing the next week. And this went on for 2 years. So this was just nonstop for me. I had an unlimited supply. So this is when things really, really took off. And, swallowing 20 pills doesn't work anymore. You have to start snorting them. That's what I did. And before you knew it, I was up near 700-800 milligrams a day within a year by the time I'm 20 years old.
Is that a lot?
That's a lot. And I was probably only 110 pounds. I was really skinny. I probably wasn't eating much. And it just wasn't good. And like I said, I didn't know the dangers. I remember I tried to quit one time not knowing. Like, I was just like, this is kind of taking a toll on me. Like, I probably figured that out a little bit too late, but I figured it out. It's like, this might not be good for me. And I tried to stop. And that's when I realized that I couldn't. And I felt deathly ill. And I started researching it at that time. And I began to learn what was really going on in my body.
Then you got to learn about dope sick.
Dope sick. So I played tennis and basketball. I hurt my back, and I was prescribed some pain pills for that too. It was all in the same. That doctor wasn't giving me, like, refilling my scripts, but shortly after is that when I got involved with that physician. It ended up doing 6 years in prison for doing all that.
Wow. So when did you switch from pills to heroin, and what was the reason for the switch?
It was basically, number one, because of the money. So when I say I was using like 800 milligrams a day, like that can be like a $500 to $600 a day habit. And if you start doing heroin instead with that same amount, you might spend $80.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, it's a pretty big difference, and also the heroin's stronger and you feel it longer and all that stuff.
Okay. So I've always heard people switch to heroin because it is less expensive and easier to get, but I didn't realize it was quite that much less expensive.
It is.
Wow.
The pills were outrageous.
Yeah. Was there a time also, I feel like I remember maybe 7 or 8 years ago maybe, where pills were really hard to get? Or is that still the case?
They're
like,
not easy to get right now.
Yeah. I just remember all of a sudden people talking about they were really hard to get. Nobody could get anything.
I think it was after, like, probably 2012, 2013, somewhere around then.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Is when the feds really started cracking down on the doctors and stuff, and a lot of people went to prison.
Yeah, that makes sense. How old were you when you actually realized that it was a problem, or realized that you had a problem?
It was earlier on, probably when I was 18 in high school, because I was hanging out with friends, going over to parties, and all my friends are drinking beer like everyone else is doing, maybe smoking a little weed. And I didn't want to do that. Like, that whole week, I'd be going through people's medicine cabinets, stocking up on Percocet or whatever I could get my hands on, and taking them all at once and smoking weed on top of it. Like, that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want alcohol. I didn't want to do what the other people were doing. Like, I found what I wanted, and that was it. And that was when I was 18. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this isn't normal. Like, I definitely thought that to myself. Like, everyone else is doing this, but, like, I'm swallowing a handful of pills. And
I even had that moment with alcohol when I was like 24, and I had the same kind of moment. Like, I just knew I did it differently than other people were doing it. I knew I was more attached to it than other people were. So how old were you the first time you went to treatment? When did your treatment career begin?
It was 2007. It was, I believe, April of 2007. And I just lost a close friend of mine to an overdose the month before. My parents knew that I was hanging out with him a lot, so at that point they were pretty concerned, and they did an intervention on me, and I went to treatment for the first time.
How long was your first stint in treatment?
My first stint in treatment went 7 days.
Oh, 7 whole days.
Yeah,
and you thought that was going to cover it?
Well, I used the entire time I was in there.
So I guess I don't have to ask why that wasn't successful.
No. I couldn't get through the detox phase. That was a difficult phase for me to get through.
Because it was different then, right?
It was different. So when I got up there, this was before they did Suboxone treatment at this particular rehab. And what they would do is they would give you like clonidine, some blood pressure medicine, and some other stuff for your pain, your joints and stuff like that. But like, it was too difficult with the amount that I was doing. I was physically incapable of doing it. Like, I was going to kill myself or kill someone else. Or like, I just couldn't deal with it. So I had someone bring me some of the OxyContin and some syringes, and I spent a week shooting up in the bathroom of a rehab center. That's what I did. And when that ran out, I was afraid of feeling the way that I felt the first day when I came in. So I called me a ride and left.
Was that the first time you had really been hardcore dope sick?
Yes. Because I always had access. I'd never gone without for years.
Right.
For probably a year.
I think sometimes we don't realize too, like, again, how powerful these drugs are, and that opiates are pain pills, right? So their whole job is to block pain. So when you go off of them, especially cold turkey, then all your pain receptors are wide open. And I think people don't understand that that's kind of how it works. So it is horrific pain, they say. I know Dr. Drew one time on television said he described it as bone-crushing pain.
It is bone-crushing pain. That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, that's what he said. It's always stuck with me. And I was like, well, it just makes sense because its job is to make you not have pain. So when you take it away, you're going to have all that pain.
And it just feels like your skin is crawling. Like, I don't even know how to put words on it, but it is the most like if someone just ran their hand on your arm or something or just touched you, like you would jump because it just makes you cringe. Like your skin is just literally like on fire.
It's weird too, because I think when I hear these stories, like if it's that bad, then why would you do it again?
It's that mental piece.
So over the course of time, wait, how old are you now?
33.
And how old were you the first time you went to treatment?
It was 2007. It was either 20 or 21.
So in that time, how many times have you gone to treatment?
Since that first time?
Yeah.
I've been to a total of 12 treatment centers.
12 treatment centers. In like 12 years, really.
Basically,
yeah.
yeah.
12 and 12.
Nice. Although I think I hit 5 in 1 year. That was 2015 and 16. I went to a total of 5.
That's a lot.
So I did that good. At least I did that well.
You had some level of dedication there. What was your longest treatment you ever went to?
So I went to a treatment in Texas that was a year long. I actually stayed longer than a year. Stayed 13 months. And that was really helpful. I went there in 2008, so it was actually at the beginning of my treatment marathon. And it was really good for me. They taught me a lot. I met some really, really good people. Some who I stay in contact with still today, and I learned a lot about AA, a lot about the Big Book, and it was really good. But it wasn't. I was pretty much forced into going there. I always wanted to get high more than I wanted to be sober, and that was the case even when I stayed sober. I stayed sober for 23 months, including treatment. So about 11 months after treatment, I stayed sober.
Did you, in that 11 months, did you feel like, were you craving all the time? Like, did you feel like in that time you wanted to get high? Or did you feel pretty comfortable?
I was okay for a lot of it, but there were times where I think a piece in me knew that I was going to use again. Like, that's something that I don't have a feeling of today, but back then, like, that was just in me. Like, I knew at some point, didn't really know when. I was kind of just taking a break, but I knew it was going to happen at some point, and it did.
Yeah.
And it's because I didn't make any changes to make that not happen.
After doing treatment all those times, like, was there ever a moment that you felt like really discouraged? Like, was there ever a time that you felt like you were never going to get it? Or did you know that you hadn't really applied yourself?
I was completely discouraged. Like, the last 3 years of me using, I had completely given up because I'd been to treatment so many times. I'd given it some effort, not the effort that I probably could have. But it was really discouraging. I'd lost a lot of friends to, overdosing, friends getting murdered. And it was really discouraging. I really thought that I had no chance. And then at one point I ended up in a state hospital. Like, it had got so bad that I was homeless. This was before I moved back to Texas. I was in Kansas City. And I had just totaled my car for the second time in about a month. I fell asleep at the wheel and went up on the side of the road on Ward Parkway and totaled my car. And I had it towed to a shop, and I had them drop me off at my mom's house, and she wouldn't let me in the house because she was afraid that I would steal something, that I would go crazy or whatever, probably for good reason. And I slept outside. The next morning I woke up in her backyard on a lounge chair, and it was her and my sister, and they'd been through this with me so many times before. They knew what was going on. They just wanted to help, and they even told me, we'll take you to a hotel and we'll stay with you and help you. We'll give you Xanax to help get off they'll do anything. They just want me to get off the shit.
Right.
And I was just so fucked up in my head that I said no, and I fell back asleep. And the next thing I know, the police had come. My mom called the police because she thought that I was suicidal or I was going to kill myself. She probably just didn't know what to do at that point. I couldn't stay there. She wouldn't let me stay there. And I was basically just passed out in her backyard. So they took me, and they actually put me on a 48-hour hold. And they took me to the state hospital.
Psychiatric hospital?
Yeah. And I went there, and I was with some people that were really crazy. They were people that maybe murdered family members, and they went to court and they were declared insane, and they're going to spend the rest of their life in this state hospital. And that's who I was with in there. And I'm withdrawing off of heroin while I'm watching these people. And that was an eye-opener, but I still didn't want to quit because I'd already given up. Like, this is what my life is going to be. I've tried so many times. This is the way it is. And the only reason I got out of there is because I found a treatment center to go to again. And I told myself before that I'm never going back to treatment ever, because it's not going to do any good for me. Like, I've already been in the program. I know I need to go to meetings and get a sponsor and do all that stuff. So what's the purpose of me going back to rehab? And that's what I was telling myself. But I went back because that's the only way I could get out.
Right. So you were completely discouraged and had kind of given up. Did your family feel the same way?
I'm not really sure. I've never asked them, but I would assume so.
Yeah.
I mean, they waited for years. They were just waiting to get that call, like a lot of other families. It's the same thing. I mean, I don't know if they welcomed it, but I'm sure they were really tired. And some of my family members had to distance themselves because it hurt too bad. And I get that too.
So now 12 treatment centers in 12 years, and you are celebrating a year of sobriety, clean and sober for a full year. Like, how is your sobriety different this time than it was? Like, before you said you were 23 months, like that's pretty good too. So how is it different this time?
Well, one of the big things that is different is I've been completely open and honest this time. And I have a lot of people in the program that I'm really close with. And I have a lot of really good friends. And that's just something that I've never had before. And that's something that I'm not willing to throw away. Like, I've never felt so okay with just being in my whole life. And I know that I'm okay as long as I'm honest with these people and we can get through all this shit together. Because that's what we do every day. We get through life together. We're all going through battles, and that's what we do as long as we're open and we're able to communicate with each other.
I love that you said that, because that's one of the things that I get so frustrated with sometimes when people talk about not wanting to go to Alcoholics Anonymous or NA or whatever, any 12-step program, and people talk about not liking it. And it's so strange to me because, like, I get that it's not going to be for everybody, but I also feel like oftentimes we kind of build it up in our heads to be something that it really isn't, because I just feel like we're just a group of people hanging out together that are just really making a conscious effort to be better people. Like, that's what it comes down to. And I've also never been around a group of people who love each other so much, who are so willing to do anything for each other. I mean, we really, in the program, like, we drop everything to be there for one another and support each other in everything that we're doing. And I've never had a group of people like that. I've never seen people more loving and generous and supportive as people in the program. It really is life-changing.
It's changed my life.
Yeah. I wish more people had that experience or talked about it. I guess maybe people just don't talk about it. I guess that's why we have a podcast now. What would you say in your year now, what would you say is your most challenging time in your sobriety? Like, what is the hardest thing that you've had to face and overcome and stay sober?
Well, part of my, I've had a lot of friends relapse, and a lot of it happened right in front of me. So one of the particular situation, I walked in on someone actively shooting up with a spoon on the bed, and I hadn't seen heroin in a long time, and it was right in front of me. And it was really sad too, because I was working with his dad, trying to keep him sober and come up with a plan and all that. And when I was, really working with his dad and talking to him on a daily basis, I felt like I was talking to my own dad. And for the first time, I saw the look on his eye, and I knew that that's exactly how my dad felt. Like, I knew I put them through a lot of shit, but I hadn't seen it because I wasn't around. And I was just sitting back and shooting up and numbing all my pain while my family is going through all this pain, and they're not numbing it. They're not able to numb all that pain. They're going through it, and they're doing the best that they can do. So that was the first time. That was really difficult for me. It was an eye-opener, but it was really good for me at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that I need to see to keep myself motivated, because I don't want anyone to feel pain like that.
Yeah. It's hard to understand how bad that pain is, too. And for me, I mean, my story is a little bit different in that, the majority of my addiction, I lived really far away from my family. However, at the absolute worst of my addiction, I was close to them, but I really sheltered them from a lot. Like, they didn't know really anything that was going on with me. Like, they knew I probably drank too much, but they had no idea the extent of it. They didn't ever know any time I had been arrested or had been to the emergency room. Like, they didn't know any of that stuff. So I didn't really have to deal with that either. But I know for my mom, like, in her core, like, she knew what was going on. She knew I wasn't well. And it is hard, and I think that's oftentimes too why I spend so much time with families, and I'll spend so much time on the phone with parents and trying to help them make sense of it, because it is almost a living amends for me, trying to offer support to other families going through it the way my family probably had to, that I'm still not even aware of, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do with stuff like that? Like, what is your recipe for staying sober? Like, what are the things that keep you healthy and strong?
Well, like I was talking about earlier, I have a sponsor. I work steps. I'm working with a lot of other alcoholics. I try to go to a meeting as much as I can. I don't make it every day of the week, but I make it as much as I can. The biggest thing for me is to just have a lot of people behind me, and I need to let as many people as I can get to know me, and on a daily basis just communicate with them, because that's super, super important for me. Before, I was completely closed off and didn't want to be honest about anything. I didn't want to let anybody in on anything going on in my life because I was scared for a lot of different reasons. But that's the main thing for me. That's why I stay sober, is the support that I have around myself, and I'm able to be a support for a lot of other people too.
Did you have that thing? Like, a lot of us have this thing where we don't want people to know too much about us, because it's like, I had this fear that if you knew how fucked up I really was, that you wouldn't like me. Like, I thought that about everybody. Like, if they really knew how bad I was or what a bad person I was, like, nobody would want to be my friend. Nobody would like me at all. Did you have that
I think
too?
I felt that way through my first 12 treatment centers. And then, this time around, I kind of try to use those things to my advantage. I use that history and try to use it to my advantage to help someone else, because I have been to 12 treatment centers. I've been to prison. I've lived on the streets. I've done all of that. So, there's a lot of other people that don't want to talk about that stuff either, the way that they've been living.
At the same time, I tell you this all the time. These are the stories to me that are the absolute most important stories that we share, because so many people are struggling with these things, and the level of what you have gone through and how many treatment centers you've been through to come out on the other side of that is so huge, because people are giving up. And, I do interventions and stuff like that, and I have families that want to give up, and their person is maybe on their third treatment center. And I'm like, don't give up, dude. We're getting closer. Don't stop trying. Like, we're getting closer. And I feel like those are the stories that everybody needs to hear, because there's so much hope in that. And there's so much light at the end of the tunnel that people do want to give up, and they're exhausted. And I mean, we know for sure how exhausting that addiction is, and how much it beats you down and just takes over your whole life and makes you feel like just such a piece of garbage. So I think to go through what you've gone through that's the most important story for people to hear, because there's always the chance of overcoming it. There's always the chance of making it to sobriety,
Yeah, for sure. And that's what I, when I go and talk at treatment centers and stuff, that's what I tell them, because a lot of people in treatment are not there for their first time.
Right.
Right.
And
if I can go up there and tell them, look, I've been through 12 treatment centers and I'm sober for a year today, like that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's kind of ironic. I didn't really get sober after going to a treatment center. I got sober before I left prison. And that was kind of, the end of my bottom. Is like, holy shit, I don't really want to live like this. So
yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I kind of forget about that part, that it wasn't, in the end, so to speak, it wasn't treatment necessarily that did it. I mean, I don't think that you probably could have done it and put together these 12 months had you not had the treatment history that you had. Because I think, yeah, treatment is really helpful. You do learn a lot, but sometimes that's not the end all be all,
Right.
What was prison like for you? Like, what was it that made you decide to get clean in that setting?
Well, I used basically the entire time that I was in there up until I was about to get out in 2 weeks, and I knew that I had no place to live, literally, unless I moved into a sober living house, because I couldn't go home. I couldn't go live where I was living before because that was the street. That was a house that had no power, electricity, no restrooms, all that kind of stuff. I was living on the street. So I had no options other than to move into sober living. So I made a choice. I was going to stop smoking weed. That's what I did in prison. And I'd stopped doing that 2 weeks before I got out. And at the time, I wasn't really sure if I was intending on staying sober or not. But I knew short term, if I don't want to live on the street, this is what I have to do today. And that's where it started for me, not knowing where it was going to end up.
You and I were just talking about this before we started recording too. I just want something to happen today that makes somebody want to do it again tomorrow. You know, like that's how I look at sobriety. I just want something to happen today that makes you want to do it again tomorrow. And you just start stringing days together, and you don't have to understand it always, and you don't have to know what you're doing, but you just keep doing it over and over again, and you figure it out as you go. I feel like that's really been a lot of your experience, just stringing days together.
Yeah, that's and this first year has been really long. I mean, it has. It feels like it's just going on forever and ever. But it feels really good to know that I got through it. You know, I'm able to be uncomfortable now without running and using because I feel uncomfortable. I've had a lot of practice at feeling like shit and getting through it. And that's huge.
That's huge because that's the thing that we really don't think we can do. Well, that's the thing we really can't do.
I could never do it before.
We run to substance for every feeling,
exactly.
Whether it's good or bad. I would just run to substance. So I think when we get clean and sober, we don't believe in ourselves that we're capable of feeling uncomfortable and getting through it because we haven't done it, right?
Exactly.
It just takes practice. How is your family now? I mean, you're at a year. Like, what are your relationships with your family like now? How have they changed?
They're really good. They still need a lot of work, but like they trust me again for the most part. Like maybe not like give me the credit card or anything like that. But I mean, they trust me for the most part, and we talk, you know, on a weekly basis, and it's really good. They're really happy for me. I'm able to be there for them when they need anything at all. They can call me and they know that. And that's a huge difference because they didn't think that I would even be around at this point. There's no way.
That's such a great feeling, too, to be available for them. You know, like after everything they do for us, like to be at a point finally when you can be dependable for your family is so huge.
Yeah, it feels good. Yes.
Yeah, it feels really good.
Yeah.
What were your holidays like this past year? How were they different?
Well, first of all, I wasn't falling asleep in my plate. So that's
that
a
helped.
good start. It was really good, though. I mean, my sister came in from California, and I was able to spend some time with her. And my grandma, she's sick right now. I was able to spend some time with her, which was really good. You know, everyone's getting older, and I spent a lot of years not around on the holidays. So it was pretty emotional, and it was really nice. Everyone was really grateful, and I just did my best to help with whatever I could because I've never helped before.
One of the greatest gifts of sobriety.
Yes.
Being able to help and just be around and available. Okay, final question, my favorite question. What is your favorite thing about being a sober person?
Well, it's pretty simple. Just the freedom. I mean, it's the freedom from everything. You know, I couldn't wake up I woke up every morning for 10 years being sick, physically, emotionally, and spiritually sick. And I spent a decade doing that. So every day I wake up, honestly, I'm grateful that I don't feel like that. Because before I could even open my eyes, my mindset was, how much do I have? If I don't have any, how much money do I have in my wallet? If I don't have any money in my wallet, how am I going to get money? Before my eyes even opened, every day for 10 years. That's the way my brain worked. And that's not there anymore. So that's a miracle. And that's the main thing for me. I have peace, and I do things that I never did before today.
That's so good. Well, David, thank you so much for doing the show with me. I so appreciate you sharing your story. Again, I think your stories like yours are the most important to be shared and to give families hope and to give other addicted people hope that just don't ever stop trying and don't ever give up on yourself and don't ever give up on sobriety because it's always possible.
Well, thank you for having me.
You've reached the end of another great episode of the Addiction Unlimited podcast. Candid and honest conversation about addiction and recovery. Be sure to visit us at addictionunlimited.com to join the conversation and access show notes and links to everything we talked about. Love this episode? Please take 30 seconds to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes to help us improve and give you the information you want. Thanks for listening. See you next week.